Good morning. Before we proceed, I'd like to take care of one item of committee business by approving the third quarter activities report for the committee. The activities report has been distributed to all members, and I ask Dr. Rowe for a motion on this resolution.
So moved.
Very good. Okay, so no objection. So moved. That concludes our business meeting, and I would now turn to the committee's attention to today's scheduled hearing. The full committee hearing will come to order. Good morning. Welcome to our hearing, Reclaiming the Process, Examining the VBA Claims Transformation Plan as a Means to Effectively Serve our Veterans. Through their service and sacrifice on behalf of our nation, veterans have ensured that our American way of life can continue long into the future. Our committee has the privilege of serving these heroes to whom we owe an immense debt of gratitude by ensuring that they have reasonable access to the benefits they earned. This access to promised benefits have been made ever more difficult in recent years, in my opinion, as VA continues to struggle with backlogs and unacceptable delays in getting our nation's veterans the benefits they need and have earned. On several occasions, Secretary Shinseki stated that the VA would break the back of the backlog in 2009. And in an effort to do just that, VBA has implemented a transformation plan and various initiatives that have great potential to ease such of these problems. However, despite the development of this transformation process, the backlog continues to grow, and the rate of accuracy and processing time has at best remained stagnant. Today, we will examine VBA's transformation plan and the effectiveness of these initiatives in resolving the core issue of processing time, accuracy of decisions, and eliminating the backlog. We will specifically focus most of our attention on the Veterans Benefits Management System, or VBMS, as you will hear it referred to throughout the hearing. Again, VBMS, which VA has consistently referred to as the cornerstone of its transformation process. I know that I and my fellow committee members, and I know our ranking member, have many questions to ask as to when the system will be ready for national rollout and how issues relating to the scanning of paper documents will be handled in the future. As a matter of fact, VA's contract with the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration, the agency currently handling VA's scanning needs, expires on June 26, just 1 week from today. I'll ask what goes after, what's going to happen on June 27th. Do you have a plan? Unfortunately, the VA has waited until the last, again, the 11th hour to address this need, and to the best of my knowledge, I understand VA is working on contract solicitations. This hearing also will focus on several of VBA's other transformation plan initiatives, including disability benefit questionnaires, simplified notification letters, fully developed claims, and the iLab and the appeals design team. Although I applaud VA for taking initiatives to transform the claims process, we must ensure that these transformation efforts continue to progress in the right direction, and they are ultimately helping veterans obtain the benefits they have earned. It is time for VA to uphold its responsibility to our veterans and to the American people to break this cycle and deliver the benefits that the agency was created to provide. Also, I want to bring in an additional issue to the attention of the VA witnesses. Last week, Chancellor of the Florida College System informed the committee staff that VA has determined that 23 of the 28 Florida community colleges would not qualify to provide training under the VRAP program that was part of the Vow to Hire Heroes Act passed last November. The reason given for this denial is that each of the 23 community colleges awards a very limited number of bachelor degrees, most often in technical and healthcare fields, such as bachelor's degrees in nursing. It is clear to me that VA is ignoring the traditional community-focused approach those schools continue to offer. Unlike four-year schools that offer bachelor's and higher degrees, generally without regard to the local needs, these schools continue to provide education and training that reflect what their surrounding communities need. In fact, using VA's narrow definition of community college, if a school awarded one bachelor's degree, along with hundreds or even thousands of associate's degrees, that school would not qualify for VRAP training. It is like saying, and this is an analogy, that a bank that offers coffee to patrons is no longer a bank and is now a Starbucks. This issue is not limited to the state of Florida. According to the American Association of Community Colleges, 64 of their members, again in Florida, Nevada, Georgia, Texas, North and South Dakota, Puerto Rico, Arizona, Utah, Kansas, Wisconsin, New York, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Hawaii, Vermont, Indiana, and Washington award or are authorized to award limited numbers of bachelor degrees. I will note that several of these states have high unemployment rates among veterans. Under Secretary Hickey, the VRAP legislation is intended to retrain unemployed veterans, and we cannot let even one of those slots go unfilled. I urge you in the strongest possible way to consider the spirit of the VRAP provision in defining the term community college and to ensure that veterans in these 18 states that I mentioned are given the opportunity to retrain for high-demand jobs. Thank you very much, and now I'll yield 5 minutes to our ranking member, or if he chooses a little longer, to our ranking member, Mr. Filner. Thank you. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, here we are again. I think one of the first meetings I went to 20 years ago as a member of the Veterans Committee was on the backlog. We've hired, in the last few years, over 10,000, maybe 12,000 new employees. You got 40 so-called transformational things going on. I don't know where the name transformation comes. It doesn't do anything. What have we done in the last few years? Doubled the backlogs. Rate of inaccuracy, a recent report, up to 25%. This is disgraceful. This is an insult to our veterans. And you guys just recycle old programs, you put new names on them, and here we are again. You know what the definition of one definition of insanity is? You try the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I mean, somebody has to take responsibility for this. We just keep announcing new names, new pilot programs, on and on. We're up to 1.2 million by one count backlog. If it wasn't tragic, it would be ridiculous. Now, we haven't been able to do anything by what I think the Secretary called brute force. We're going to hire more and more people. We're going to hire more and more people, have new and new pilots. And what happens? We doubled the backlogs. I think you all know I've been trying to talk about it for many years. You got to do something different, radical. Change the whole nature of the situation. Yes, maybe these pilots will work, but you got to start from zero and try the new stuff. How do we get it down to the zero? There are ways, and we've talked about them. I don't know why the fear is there. You just keep going on, going on, going on, going on. Try something new. Try something new. You know, the IRS used to be one of the most dysfunctional agencies in America. Nobody knew when they would get their refund check. Nobody knew how it happened to their tax return. They never heard from the IRS. Yet they went through a transformational process. And what happens now? When we put, if you had a refund coming, when you just filed your tax return, within 3 weeks, guaranteed, you got your refund check. 3 weeks. How did they do that? Well, one thing they do is accept your claim subject to audit. We all have to be honest because we know we might be audited. Yet they send you the check. You all know that there's been intellectual background for adopting a similar system. And I would argue that if a claimant has help from the VSOs, either county, state, VFW, American Legion, whoever, if they get help from a certified veteran service officer, which we certify, in preparing their claim, grant the claim, subject to audit. Send out a check. Do something. I mean, say 80% of it, or say all the visible things. If an amputation, why should you wait 3 years for all the other parts of your claim to be adjudicated? I could tell the guy is amputated. I don't need 3 years of study on this. Grant the claim, subject to audit. Get those things off the books. Do something different. Do something radical. That's the only way we're going to solve this. And I will tell you what, this is not just backlogs of a year or 90 days or 2 years. I don't know how many of our claims, maybe, Madam Secretary, you can tell me roughly for Agent Orange or Vietnam era. I would roughly guess a couple 100,000. Is that in the ballpark? Do you know offhand, Ms. Hickey? I mean, is it about that? I'm sorry, how many? No, but how many are still in the system, have not been, are waiting adjudication? I didn't hear. Well, when you get here, but
maybe you can ask that.
I'll ask that question when you're here. But I would guess, now these are not 3 months, 6 months. These are 35-year claims. These are people who have been suffering for 35 years. I would say to my colleagues on this committee, let's do something. We just had an activities report approved. I'm not sure what we've done with all that activity. But we have never welcomed home, as you all know, our Vietnam vets. They have never been welcomed home. Half of the veterans on the street tonight homeless, or half the homeless on the street are Vietnam vets. If you haven't heard this statistic before, my colleagues, you know there have been more suicide by Vietnam vets than died in the original war. It's over 55,000. We did something wrong. Let's grant those claims. Forget the suffering. Forget all the presumptiveness. Forget all the studies. These people have suffered for 30 or more years. That will wipe out whatever hundreds of thousands of claims there are. Say welcome home to our Vietnam vets. Let's grant their Agent Orange claims. Yeah, 1 or 2 will slip by that shouldn't be in there, but 99% are going to be okay. Let's not worry about 1%. Oh, but the cost. You know, Maytost for those Vietnam vets, I don't know, $1 billion? Seems to me after 30 years it's worth it. It's about to, we got to say thank you. You know, we have a $14 trillion debt. I don't think $1 billion is going to add much to that. Let's say thank you to the Vietnam vets. Let's welcome them home. But I'm telling you, folks from the VA, you got a lot of activity. I don't call it action. You got a lot of new processes. I don't call it progress. The problem has been around for decades and decades. And I see a list of 40 initiatives. I don't know if there's any plan to actually get to certain goal. And certainly the technology is not being used as quickly as it's available. We're going to have people who have investigated this and say this. You know, we got our people. I think South Carolina is one. They're planning a protest at the claim site because they can't do their job right. This has gone pretty far. If our own employees have to go on strike, this is I can't stress too much. If you're going to keep doing the same thing, we're going to keep failing. It's time for something new. Thank you.
I think the ranking member now recognize members if they choose to make an opening statement. We'll start with Mr. Lamborn from Colorado. Would you like to make an opening statement? I encourage it to be brief if you do. Okay. Ms. Brown, you're recognized.
No, sir. I'm going to wait until after the presentation.
All right. Dr. Rowe?
No.
Okay. Very good. We do have 4 panels, so I really appreciate the brevity. Let's go with Mr. Mashad. Would you like to make an opening statement, sir? All right, you're set. Okay. How about Ms. Flores? Oh, Mr. Flores. Excuse me. All right, Mr. McNerney, would you like to make an opening statement, sir? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Dr. Johnson. He's not here, so he waives it. Mr. Ross, would you like to make an opening statement? Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Runyon. All right, I believe we have Mr. Barrow. Would he like? Is he here? Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Burkle. Dr. Benishek. Okay.
They all associate themselves with my remarks. Is that correct?
All right. I think we've just about finished here. Why don't we start? Is there anyone else? Anyone else choose to make an opening statement? Thank you. Let's go ahead and proceed. I appreciate it very much. As you know, veteran service organizations are the primary entities walking our veterans through the claims process, and in my opinion, they do an outstanding job. They are in the front lines, so to speak, and experience firsthand what works and what does not work in the claims process. We appreciate their service to our veterans and the presence of the representatives on the first panel of this hearing. At this time, I'd like to welcome our first panel to the table. First, we will hear from Mr. Jeffrey Hall, who is the Assistant Legislative Director for the DAV. And next, we'll hear from Mr. Gerald Manar, who is Deputy Director of the Veteran Service on behalf of the VFW. And then we will hear from Mr. Richard Demankas, who is the Deputy Director for Claims representing the American Legion. And finally, we will hear from Mr. Sherman Gillums, Associate Executive Director of Benefits for the PVA. And I want to welcome you to the committee, and I appreciate your testimony here today. You're recognized, Mr. Hall, for 5 minutes. Of course, your complete statement will be entered into the record. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. On behalf of DAV and its 1.2 million members who are wartime service-connected veterans, we are pleased to be here today to offer our views regarding VBA's Claims Processing Transformation Initiatives, especially the Veterans Benefits Management System, or VBMS. Although there have been many positive changes and progress made over the past 2 years, there are troubling issues related to VBMS which raise serious questions about whether VBA's transformation efforts will be successful. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make clear at the outset that DAV is extremely pleased with the continuing partnership between VBA and VSOs. We know this transformation process is challenging, and we credit Undersecretary Hickey for setting a positive tone within VBA that we hope is a sign of a much-needed cultural change to better serve our nation's veterans. However, despite General Hickey's leadership, DAV is concerned about VBA's failure to effectively resolve basic issues which we and other VSOs have repeatedly raised over the past 2 years, issues such as providing VSOs who hold power of attorney for claimants with access to VBMS, and implementing a scanning solution to digitize paper claims files, particularly those with legacy claims. Regardless of claims being processed in VBMS at the 4 pilot VAROs, as of today, DAV National Service Officers are still without access to the VBMS system. Instead of resolving this basic issue, a variety of questionable workaround solutions have been implemented so VSOs are able to review decisions within the VBMS. For instance, in Providence and Wichita, our NSOs are emailed a PDF version of the VBMS rating decision to review, but must use the old virtual VA system in order to review the evidence. In Salt Lake City, our NSOs actually have to go outside the office to a different building where they are provided a paper copy of the VBMS rating decision to review. But in order to review the evidence, they must request the paper file, which is then made available to them. And at Fort Harrison, our NSO must go to the RVSR's desk and utilize his or her computer in order to review the VBMS rating decision and evidence in the same manner as an RVSR. DAV has been told the reason that VSOs aren't able to access via VBMS is because the system is unable to provide different levels of access for POA holders. As a result, the system has blocked all VSO access to veterans' files. DAV has been assured that a partial solution to this problem will be included in the next release of VBMS scheduled for July 16th. But, Mr. Chairman, regardless of VBA's assurance to fix this problem, the fact that such a basic prerequisite for VBMS success, POA access, was either unanticipated or ignored until now makes us question whether there are similar fundamental gaps or workarounds embedded in other parts of VBMS. Another issue in VBMS that should have been resolved long ago is VBA's plan and solution for scanning and digitizing paper claims folders. This issue is still unresolved today, in part because VBA has not yet definitively answered basic questions about when and which legacy documents will be scanned into VBMS. And with the next scheduled VBMS release to 12 additional VAROs only a few weeks away, this issue must be resolved. Also concerning to DAV is VBA's recent implementation of simplified notification letters, or SNLs, which are an automated rating decision and notification letter combined. DAV and other VSOs have voiced concerns to VBA about the quality of the SNLs since they were first implemented. For example, I recently reviewed an SNL for PTSD that was denied by VBA, and in the space of a very short letter, it contained a confusing and somewhat contradictory explanation that even an experienced service officer would have difficulty understanding. The SNL stated that VBA had granted entitlement to hospital and medical treatment because a psychosis or other mental illness was diagnosed. However, it did state that the evidence did not show a current diagnosed disability. The SNL furthered that VBA had determined the claimed PTSD was not related to military service, so service connection could not be granted. However, VBA did concede that the veteran experienced a stressful event in service for fear of hostile or military or terrorist activity. Mr. Chairman, clearly the SNLs are intended to streamline the rating and notification part of the process and help reduce the backlog of claims. However, this should not be at the expense of the veteran or the quality of the rating and notification. The issues we have found in the SNLs lead us to question the legal validity of these ratings and whether VBA has cut other corners within VBMS in order to meet these self-imposed deadlines for reducing the backlog. So in closing, Mr. Chairman, due to the highly technical nature of modernizing VBA's IT systems, DAV believes it is more crucial now more than ever for an outside independent review to be conducted. We suggest that the best way to accomplish this might be to invite a panel of IT experts from leading companies such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, or Apple, who may be willing to review the VBMS on a pro bono basis to provide an informed judgment about whether it is likely to be successful. For our nation's 3.8 million disabled veterans who relied on disability compensation to meet all or some of their needs, it is imperative that VBA be successful in transforming the claims processing system. VBMS is a critical element for that success. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I'll be happy to answer any questions from you or the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Thank you for your testimony. Now I'll call on Mr. Menard, who represents the VFW. You're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present the views of the more than 2 million veterans and auxiliaries of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States on VBA claims transformation. After many years of fits and starts, VBA settled on a plan to overhaul its claims processing systems. The first step in that plan was to determine what computer and software infrastructure was necessary to support a 21st century claims processing system. The result is VBMS, VBA's foundation for that new system. It is designed to begin fulfilling immediate needs and to be agile enough to accommodate future changes. It is important to understand that VBMS is the foundation. We anticipate that some efficiencies will be realized from the start, but real quality and production improvements will occur when VBA adds software that includes rules-based decision-making, electronic transfer of data from DoD and private healthcare providers to VA, and a redesigned workflow within VBA, as well as other features. There is a concern that rollout of VBMS may be delayed. There is a fine line between rolling out a new program too soon and delaying rollout too long while seeking to fix all the problems. To date, VBMS is in 4 regional offices, and we are told fewer than 800 cases have been processed to completion. This is hardly thorough testing. We believe that rolling out VBMS prematurely is a bad business practice, bad for veterans, and bad for morale of an already demoralized VA workforce. VBA has a troubled history of deploying programs too soon. Burrell's redesign in the 1980s and RBA 2000 are just two programs which were not properly tested before rollout. Tens of thousands of man-hours in lost productivity occurred while programs were being fixed. We encourage this committee to continue its oversight of VBA while recognizing that it may be necessary to accept modest delays in the deployment of VBMS in order to avert the major problems which often accompany premature deployment. Simplified notification letters is an initiative thoroughly embraced by VBA. An examination of what this initiative does to veterans is illustrative of the mindset of VBA in the last year. Decisions made following World War II contain no explanation of why a particular decision was made. Ratings contained the name of the disability, a diagnostic code, an evaluation, and an effective date, nothing more. Over the next 3 decades, rating decisions began to include some of the reasons for decisions. Following creation of the Veterans Court in 1988, VA began to include more detailed explanations in its ratings, a time-consuming process for VA. Last summer, VBA established a team to explore the idea of creating ratings, which require less time to produce. The SNL program was the result. This initiative substitutes codes at the end of the rating instead of a narrative explaining the reasons and bases for VA's decisions. The codes are used to select standard paragraphs for inclusion in decision notice letters to veterans. These notices are generic and do not provide analysis of the evidence, information required by law to enable veterans to decide whether the decisions in their cases are likely to be correct. Veterans are faced with the choice of blindly accepting the decision or filing a notice of disagreement in order to obtain the reasons for the decision. The VFW conducted a review of ratings and decision notice letters in the Atlanta Regional Office last September. We concluded that 44% of the 65 cases we reviewed contained clear errors, poor judgment, or questionable rating practices. Over the ensuing months, we pressed VA about the inadequate notice provided veterans. Undersecretary for Benefits General Hickey listened to our concerns and made changes in the SNL program in an attempt to address the problems we noted. In February 2012, rating specialists were given additional instructions on providing sufficient details and discussion to explain their decisions. Restrictions on how much free text narrative they could use were removed. At the time these changes were implemented, we concluded that it was possible to create adequate decisions and notice letters if the personnel in the field followed those instructions. In recent weeks, the VFW has conducted a review of SNL ratings and letters from several regional offices. 53% of the cases reviewed failed to provide adequate notice. Only a few examples of rating and notice letters complied with the latest instructions from VBA and provided acceptable notice. In conclusion, VBA's apparent inability to compel compliance by adjudication personnel with the most recent written directives concerning the SNL program force us to renew our opposition to this initiative. VBA's desire to increase production should not come at the expense of veterans' legal right to know why decisions were made in his case. Canned generic paragraphs are not sufficient to tell them why their claims were decided in a particular way. VBA should suspend the SNL program until it can ensure that veterans receive the adequate notice required by law. This concludes my testimony. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Menard. I appreciate it. Now we'll call on Mr. Dominguez, who represents the American Legion. You're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee. On behalf of the American Legion, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here today and talk about the programs VA is deploying to change the office operational environment. These changes and programs can fall under many headings: modernization, tools of the 21st century, but one thing anyone who spent a lot of time around the claims process knows: they're here to help and try to tame the backlog. The American Legion has heard a lot of communication over the past few years about the commitment to fix the problem and ensure our disabled veterans are enduring needless delays of months and years to receive the benefits they earned through their hard service. Only 2 years ago, at our American Legion convention in Milwaukee, Secretary Shinseki boldly set forth the promise that this is the year we break the backlog, and set out benchmarks: 98% accuracy and no claims pending over 125 days by 2015. As the numbers of claims filed have soared, VA has deployed multiple pilots, and programs across the country with the promise of being the tools that will help tame the backlog and bring the crisis to heel. We want to be optimistic. We want to believe the many programs being unveiled are going to fix the problems, but it's hard to find optimism when so many red flags pop up. The VBMS system is in place in only a handful of regional offices, yet already we've seen many employees using workarounds to get the job done. These big red flags, that's a big red flag. If the system can't even operate smoothly in limited release, how badly will it bog down when it's finally rolled out throughout the nation? The DBQ program of Disability Benefits Questionnaires was supposed to help alleviate the long wait times for compensation and pension exams by making it easier for private doctors to submit medical evidence in a format VA could better use to help decide cases. However, the DBQ forms either don't have the needed space for nexus opinions, or VA won't release the forms that do have the space to the private doctors. This practice is essentially undermining the point of the DBQ program. Why deploy a program that is crippled to start from the very beginning? Finally, we are seeing red flags revolving around the scanning process for the VBMS, which is deeply disturbing as accurate. Usable electronic data is the foundation stone for everything VA is hoping to do in the future. We are told on one hand that NARA will handle all the scanning needs. We are told also that some of the regional offices have been doing scanning in-house. This doesn't seem to be consistent among ROs either. If it doesn't appear to be part of the so it doesn't appear to be part of a coherent plan. Are the ROs equipped with the same technology and expertise with OCR and other key components to provide workable data? Why bother to shift to electronic forms if you aren't going to use siftable and sortable data? From early conversations with NARA, personnel indicated there was some confusion as to their role in the long run. With no clear plan for what's in store following the conclusion of the fiscal year in September, we hope to learn farther today of what's going to happen after October 1st, and that most importantly, the quality of that data is going to be a major factor in determining the success or failure of any operating model in an electronic environment. Ultimately, it's not the lack of confidence in VA's commitment to rolling out programs to try to address the backlog. It is that we fear an over-reliance on the ability of tools and programs to fix the problem may put us merely further down the road with a lot more money spent and the same problems we face today and have faced for many years. The backlog isn't going to go away because of a wave of a magic computer wand. I am reminded of what this country did in the 1960s when faced with a seemingly unsurmountable challenge of putting a man on the moon and returning him safely. To be sure, NASA had large budgets. But to be fair, the technology used, such as it was cutting edge for the time. The bottom line, however, is that in those rooms full of guys with basic tools like slide rules, pencils, paper solved perhaps one of the greatest engineering challenges in history of mankind. This nation succeeded in that goal because of a mindset instilled by men like Gene Kranz and his famous motto, which bears consideration even today: failure is not an option. This concludes my briefing, my testimony, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time. Thank you.
For your testimony, gentlemen. And now I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes to ask questions. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Filner, members of the committee, on behalf of Paralyzed Veterans of America, I want to thank you for this opportunity to discuss VA's 21st century transformation, particularly as it is embodied by perhaps its most anticipated initiative, the Veterans Benefits Management System. I will begin by commending VA for recognizing the need to answer the emerging demands of our time and explore new paths toward a more efficient, more accurate, and more transparent VA claims process. We also appreciate VBA Undersecretary Allison Hickey's standing invitation to the VSO community to participate in the constructive discussion on how the claims process can best improve and whether steps taken thus far have worked. Paralyzed Veterans of America believes any system proffered as the solution to an inefficient claims process must be based upon modern, paperless information technology that is capable of continuous improvement. Whether VBMS meets this standard is the unanswered question here. What is also unclear is the exact vision for VBMS and its objectives. On paper, it is one of, as we've said here, over 40 VA pilots and initiatives launched under the 21st Century VA Transformation Plan. Conceptually, it is explained as a paperless system that enables the various processes and technologies, such as rules-based calculators and fast-track processes being tested around the country. It was originally going to be an online digital storage system for records. It has now morphed into something different, begging questions on the desired end goal for VBMS. Whatever it is, this needs to be made clear to the various stakeholders who will be relied upon to make it work. We know that VBMS was intended to enable more efficient claims process flow, to reduce cycle time through the elimination of paper claims, and to support process changes like the segmentation of complex claims and auto adjudication. VBA launched the pilot in 2 locations, Providence, Rhode Island, and Salt Lake City, Utah. Its success to date is qualified by the reality that the system seems designed to handle simpler cases than those PVA typically sees. Many of our cases entailed seeking benefits for veterans with catastrophic injury or disease, which often triggers entitlement to a range of monetary and ancillary benefits. None of the 484 cases processed through VBMS in Providence were ours, and only approximately 10 of the 239 processed through Salt Lake City have crossed our desks. Thus, the new system remains wholly untested in our view. Some have fancied a TurboTax-style solution for claims processing. However, degree of disability evaluations in situations where overlapping conditions and residual impairment are present do not lend themselves easily to rules-based technologies such as special monthly compensation calculators and disability evaluation builders. An audiogram can provide exact measures of lost audible function, which is why a hearing loss calculator makes sense. But I've yet to see a reliable, rules-based tool that accurately reconciles spinal cord injury and its residuals, which can include lower extremity loss of use, neurogenic bowel and bladder, neuropathic pain, need for aid and attendance of another, need for a higher level of specialized care in some cases, and severely diminished quality of life in all cases. If it has not done so already, Paralyzed Veterans of America recommends that VBA take older, previously adjudicated ratings and test them against the outcomes achieved, particularly hospital codes, and ratings given under U.S. Code 1114K, R1, and R2, which is typical in the paralyzed veteran community, using rules-based calculators in order to determine their true accuracy. And of course, we will be highly interested in those findings. We do appreciate the other measures VA has undertaken to reduce the overall backlog, key among them the Disability Benefits Questionnaires, or DBQs, the Integration Lab, or iLab concept, and the fully developed claims process. For the most part, these initiatives have proven to be adequate remedies for curing some of the, and I stress, the procedural problems noted in the claims development process. None of these are perfect solutions, however, and I can offer both pros and cons on each as reported by our field staff. That said, we are collectively striving for progress, not perfection here. So, Paralyzed Veterans of America remains optimistic about the impact potential of these initiatives. Mr. Chairman, all of these initiatives seem to have 2 critical aspects in common. They are wholly driven by statistics and are very resource intensive. As long as they render real results as determined through honest, objective assessment, progress is likely despite inevitable setbacks, many of which offer lessons learned going forward. Most importantly, one cannot lose sight of the simple virtue of having well-trained people given the tools they need to do quality work. And so in closing, Paralyzed Veterans of America appreciates VA's effort to aggressively tackle the backlog through ambitious, visionary initiatives and General Hickey's leadership throughout the process. We look forward to making more valuable contributions to VA's 21st century transformation effort whenever possible, particularly as it impacts the lives of paralyzed and other catastrophically disabled veterans. This concludes my testimony, and I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate it very much. I'm going to go ahead and recognize myself for 5 minutes to ask questions. Again, time and time again, you have all pointed to deeper cultural and management issues at VBA as the root cause of the issues related to the backlog and accuracy and the processing times. Please speak specifically to your concerns about the culture at VBA and its effect on achieving its goals. For example, VA's cultural reluctance to accept private medical evidence as adequate for rating purposes. Be as specifically as possible. Who would like to begin? Yes, you're recognized, sir.
It's my impression that culturally, these aren't new issues. These issues you're referring to with respect to some of the initiatives. The problem is when you have the culture overlaid with this notion that technology is going to cure problems. Now you're essentially automating a lot of the issues. The lack of willingness to adapt. We see primarily. I want to make sure I cite a specific example here. Well, we made reference to the disability benefits questionnaires and this notion that we can take a checklist, give it to a doctor, and that solves all of our issues. The problem is a lot of the thought that goes into how these DBQs are evaluated, whether they are adequate, how quickly VA changes these DBQs, signals whether the culture recognizes the need to adapt quickly. And we're here today because we want to encourage more thought as to whether the VBMS is ready for rollout. The problem is, are we going to take care of the underlying issues before we do that? PVA hasn't seen a lot of the VBMS cases, and so we'd like to see whether the complex cases actually work in this process before it's rolled out. And we say these things. We talk about these things. Now, whether that happens is yet to be determined.
Mr. Chairman, if I might address this as well. Disability benefit questionnaires are on the whole a fine tool. They're useful for standardizing data collection and providing rating specialists with the minimum that they need in order to make real quality decisions. However, you're perfectly correct in your questioning whether the culture in VA, at least in some regional offices, has sufficiently changed to allow them to accept this outside medical evidence when it comes to them without questioning it. For many years, for decades, there's been a presumption within VBA that that veterans cheat, veterans lie in order to obtain benefits. Well, there may be a few veterans who do that. In my experience, and I think I can speak from my friends here, that the number of veterans or the percentage of veterans who misrepresent their disabilities are relatively very small percentage of total veterans who seek benefits. These individuals are hurting folks. They are injured in service or acquire disabilities later in life because of their experiences in service, and they come to the VA for help. And most VA employees are there to help them, but there's this culture that keeps them from doing it. Some other cultural problems. There's this mindset, especially among VBA managers in the regional office, of this total focus on production. And what happens with that is that first you wear out employees, but also at the same time you tell them very clearly, even without saying it in words, but through your actions, through their actions, that quality doesn't matter. And the problem with that is It drives the overwhelming number of appeals, over 250,000 appeals pending right now, which is another part of VBA's backlog. And it's just a travesty when it comes to serving the men and women who have served our country so well at great sacrifice. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just expound on a couple of points that have been made by my colleagues here, and not to be redundant, but a specific example might be at a time when I had approached a rating specialist at the Chicago VA regional office when I worked there with a fully developed claim. There was no need for a VA examination. Everything was current. The veteran had purely discharged from military service very recently prior to filing his claim. Everything was current. When we submitted that claim, the rating specialist had told us that there was the need for an examination. After a little bit of back and forth, when I approached the rating specialist to discuss why he felt that there was a need for an examination when we had all of current medical evidence, and he said, because I'm not here to give the government's money away. It's my right to set up an examination for this veteran. That's what VA does. It was this where it led me to the coach, who also supported this type of, or supported the rating specialist in this, and all the way up through the service center manager without resolution. The veteran did get an examination unnecessarily, and it was just a complete and unnecessary thing. The point being that it started with a culture at the very lowest level, meaning the rating specialist who felt that he had the right to do this regardless of what he had in front of him. This was supported through his chain of command. That's a cultural problem. I don't believe that that's much different today, especially when considering the disability benefits questionnaires, as pointed out by Mr. Demankis here, about different things regarding certain sections not being on the DBQs or even in the development of them. But private medical evidence is going to be a key for that disability benefits questionnaire to be successful. You already have raters that come to us that tell us that the disability benefits questionnaires coming back from the VA are not filled out correctly. And then that requires them to set up an examination. So they're already disillusioned by the possibility of this being a positive part of the transformation initiative. We believe that the DBQs can do that, but it's not going to be as fully embraced until private medical evidence is instituted and accepted in that. And one final point about culture. I do believe that a lot of the leadership in VA at this level, they're putting out the right message. I think the rating specialist at the lowest level also, who just started with VA, is understanding that and carrying the mission. It's somewhere in between where the message is getting lost about veterans come first. VA doesn't exist without veterans. I don't believe that that's necessarily true for a lot of employees in VA, and unfortunately these are a lot of people that are making key decisions in VA, especially local decisions which affect things like creating a workaround solution that doesn't make any sense when it should have just been, the issue should have been resolved, and it should have been resolved equally across the board at every regional office or every pilot location. So again, I think the culture is, the message is at the top and it's being done correctly. It might be received or thought of at the lowest level, but somewhere in between there's a cultural issue.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll yield to my ranking member. VA has mentioned that the VSOs have been actively involved in developing these initiatives. For example, DAV input in the VBMS, and I want to ask you, Mr. Hall, how much input has DAV had in this initiative? To what extent does VBA actually involve the VSOs in the process? How frequently are you asked for input? So why don't we start with Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, yes, and we were very pleased when VA had offered VSOs. It was offered VSO-wide to have an individual tasked to work alongside of the VBMS development team over at VA Central Office. And we did. We served up our Assistant National Service Director, James Marzalak, who went over and spent the first 30 days of his time here in Washington, D.C., working closely with the VBMS team, whether it was individuals from SPAWARE or Alan Bozeman, the director of VBMS, and many others. And a lot of positive and good things came out of that I guess that tenure or that working relationship on both sides. We learned a lot about what VA was doing or what the development was of VBMS, and also he was able to provide valuable input from his experience in the field as a National Service Officer. And so we believe that that partnership was definitely worthwhile, and currently he continues to participate. That was a year ago, and he still twice a week participates in VBMS conference calls.
Thank you. Mr. Dominguez, how much were you all involved in these initiatives? Go ahead and elaborate.
Okay. I have to apologize. Just recently hired with the American Legion, so I'm not aware of what came before. I mean, I've been with the American Legion out here in Washington, D.C. for 6 months, so anything prior to December of last year, I'm not aware of. But recently, we've been out to Salt Lake City to view the PowerPoint slides and hear what they have to say. And upcoming in July, I will be part of hands-on with the VBA and VBMS out in Crystal City. So hopefully we'll continue to work. Since I've been here, they've been very upfront, and they've been explaining the whole situation and the scenarios to me. So when I bring back to the American Legion. But yeah, I apologize. Before December of 2011, I haven't had a chance.
Yeah, please.
Over the last couple of years, we've seen unprecedented reaching out and openness from VBA leadership here in Washington. General Hickey has on many occasions, even from her earliest days as Undersecretary for Benefits, included at least the major service organizations almost routinely in many of the things that she's done. In my written testimony, I mentioned that in July, I believe it was July last year, she had a two-day conference where she sat down with 50 leaders from within VBA and planned out, or at least began the process of planning out where they would be going through this next couple of years with the Transformation Project. And she included a representative from the Disabled American Veterans and the Veterans of Foreign Wars in that two-day conference. It opened up the curtain and allowed us to see inside, and we certainly thank her for that. As far as VBMS is concerned, DAV has participated and continues to participate in the development. We would have loved to do that. The problem is that even though the Veterans of Foreign Wars is a major service organization, our national staff is somewhat limited, and we could not participate. On the other hand, we do meet quite regularly with VBA and other service organizations in developing and working on some of the side issues of access for veterans, service organization representation, how we get into, eventually we'll get into the computer systems to help claimants file their claims and obtain information. And VBA is responsive in many of those things. Now, having said that, I do have to say that it's not complete, and it's regrettable that it's not. There have been many times over the last several years where we've learned of a major pilot program being implemented in one or more regional offices in the field from our field personnel. We don't hear it from the Washington staff of VBA before it's rolled out. As a consequence, service organizations are often left on the sideline in the field, and they don't have the kind of access to the computer systems or voice in changed workflow and that kind of thing that is necessary to enable us to best represent veterans.
Mr. Gillum, what has been your experience? Can you give me a specific example where maybe VA has taken your suggestion?
Sir, will the chairman yield? Will the chairman yield?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that you show the courtesy to the other members of the committee and limit your time.
Sure, absolutely. This will be the last question, and then we'll go. Thank you, sir.
A specific example I talked about in my written testimony was the special monthly compensation calculators and some of the inaccuracies that we had noted, particularly in the higher level disabilities where special monthly compensation becomes a complex formula that even when you do it on paper, it's pretty hard. We had a problem with the fact that these rules-based tools were flawed in their rules, and therefore the outcome was flawed. We did address the issue with the IT team probably about 6 months ago. I'm not sure if it's fixed across the board, but we did perceive the recommendation to be warmly received. But time is yet to tell whether it's actually been enacted. We still do get reports that the calculators render flawed outcomes. The difference is we do have the adjudicators and decision review officers willing to entertain the notion that these calculators are flawed and review the decisions. So that was of particular importance to me personally, because once you have a flawed SMC code or hospital code, we're talking years of appeals thereafter. And if they could fix it then, I believe that they would have cured what was a big problem in VA, which is almost a retrospective sense of proactivity versus fixing it the first time and getting it right, so we don't get into a position of having to fight a decision later on. I hope that answered your question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, I'll recognize Mr. Filner for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all due respect to my friends in the VSOs, as I listen to you, it seems like you swallowed the Kool-Aid. I mean, you accept the framework that has been laid out for you by the VA. You use the terminology, the bureaucracy, the acronyms that don't make any sense to your average member. If I had a person here waiting for 6 months, a year, or 30 years for a rating, what you're saying doesn't mean anything. Why am I not getting an answer, and why have I fallen into the black hole of bureaucracy, which you're all fooling around with in there? I mean, it's like you're trying to fix a mousetrap that doesn't work. Doesn't trap mice, just traps veterans. And I don't know what you're so afraid of, blowing up this system. It does not work for your members. I hear it every day. It doesn't work. Mr. Newmankis, you say you want to be optimistic, but you see red flags. In most sports, red flags means you're out of the game. So throw the red flag on these folks and get out of this game. Your story, Mr. Hall, about the rating specialist shows the system doesn't work. The guy should have accepted what you put in. We can set up the system to do just that. What are you so afraid of having to accept this massive bureaucracy, which you said, Mr. Hall, veterans come first. But you yourself are not putting the veterans first. You're playing their game. What are you so afraid of blowing up the whole system here? Mr. Hall? I mean, why are you guys playing their game? You represent the veterans. And you keep, you want to be, you said, one of you guys said, oh, I've been on the phone with them twice a week for a year. Wow. Yeah, they really got you pulled into this thing, and it doesn't work. What are you wasting your time on the phone twice a week for 2 years? Do something real. What are you so afraid of? You guys know the Bilma systems. Mr. Gould at the VA knows her very well. He's worked with her. She's written books about it. Why don't you go with it? Every veteran I talk to around the country says, yeah, that sounds great. But their representatives are bought into this crazy mousetrap here.
Sir, when you blow up something,
yeah,
you don't know what you have when you have left.
We know what we have left.
We know what we have now.
You're so afraid that one veteran is going to commit fraud. I talked to some of your officers, and they said, well, there's guys that are going to lie. Come on, 99% of them are not, and we can live with one. I'm blowing up one part of the system. I'm not blowing up the VA. I'm blowing up the way we act on a claim when it comes in that's been medically documented, as Mr. Hall says, that's had the certification of a VSO. Accept that claim. What are you afraid of about that? Represent your members. What are you afraid of?
We do represent our veterans, sir.
Then break this stupid system that we've been transforming it for decades, and you've all said that, Mr. Shinseki, I've been at speeches for the last 4 years. I love him. But he said, this is the year we're going to break the backlog. It hasn't happened. Insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, and that you expect a different result. The same thing is going to happen. You've said it in your answers to the culture. You've said it in every which way, but you're afraid. You just accept the same bureaucracy, and you're part of it. I think you ought to represent your members and break that system. If they don't want to answer it, I'll yield.
Dr. Johnson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding such an important hearing. We've heard Secretary Shinseki state his goal of reducing the turnaround time for claims processing to be no more than 125 days. Now, I don't know what private sector company would still be in business today if they required 125 days to process a claim. And I'm even more troubled to hear from today's witnesses that almost 600,000, nearly 66% of the claims have been pending for over 125 days. I look forward to today's discussion on Veterans Benefits Administration's VBA's transformation plan, what components may work and what still needs to be clarified or improved, and also to work with my colleagues to find real solutions to once and for all reduce the backlog. Our veterans sacrificed everything for America, and we owe it to them to see that they are receiving the benefits that they've earned and that any claims are processed efficiently and correctly the first time. Mr. Hall, you mentioned in your testimony the issue of service officers who hold power of attorney for claimants being unable to access VBMS. What steps have you taken to address this issue with the VA? And has the VA explained how their solution to enable POAs to view unrestricted veterans' files will work?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I mean, the issue of the POA access relatively came to light recently. And when we addressed that with VBA, the answer given was primarily that the electronic power of attorney, the limitation of consent, may be an issue where an individual would select, they limit the access to certain things like health-related things like AIDS information or alcohol or drug. And when that box is checked, just like on the paper power of attorney, if that box is checked, then that limits what can be accessed in that particular file. We rarely see that it's invoked, even in the paper form. We haven't had enough claims in the VBMS to know overall, but I would venture to guess based off of the paper form that it's probably not going to be invoked very, more than what it is now. And when speaking with VBA as far as a solution to that, because here we are 2.5 years into it, and we still don't have access to be able to provide answers to if you were to ask me, are they on the right path? We can be optimistic that we think that they're on the right path by the signs that we see. However, without that full access, which we're being denied obviously at this point because the POA issue hasn't been resolved, we're not able to give a comprehensive assessment of that. So at the last assurance, which was just last week, we were told by VBA that the POA issue, we were assured the POA issue will be resolved when the next release happens on July 16th.
Well, Mr. Hall, what suggestions do you have for the VA to establish consistency for notifying service officers of determinations for veterans' claims? You got any advice for them?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What suggestions do you have for the VA to establish consistency for notifying service officers of determinations for veterans' claims?
So when the decision comes in, I assume what you're asking me is within the VBMS pilot locations, and that that there's different things happening at different locations. I'm not sure why that even occurred to begin with. I'm not sure what was told to them as far as individual stations, as far as you figured out. Maybe it was told to them as you figure out a solution to it. I doubt very seriously that's what was happened. Or if they were just left, maybe their concerns about it locally were not answered from the leadership above. I'm not sure what really occurred there. As far as a suggestion, it simply is, if today my testimony is putting VA on notice that something different is happening in these 4 locations, I would be shocked. They have to know that these workarounds are happening at these 4 locations because, again, as we're all talking about here, this is the thing that VA is banking on to revolutionize the process. But I would caution one thing, and we may hear that. We've heard it before in VA's testimony, and that is, again, we're talking maybe back a little bit to culture. VBA has said in the past that the VBMS system is being created to break the back of the backlog, when DAV has maintained along the way that the backlog is purely a symptom of a broken system. We're looking for reform of the overall system. And without things like something as simple as what your question alludes to, what suggestions do we have? The leadership has got to make sure that that happens, that the fix, whatever it may be, even if it's a temporary fix, is done across the board.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I'll recognize Mr. Reyes for 5 minutes now.
Mr. Chairman, in deference to the members that were here at the gavel, I'll defer to them.
I believe you were first, but if you'd like to yield to Mr. Mashad, that would be fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question, talking about the systematic problem within VBA, do you feel it's a problem, for instance, if a veteran goes to Veterans Health, see a doctor, the doctor there says you're probably eligible for veterans benefits, they go over to VBA and they say, well, yeah, you're probably eligible, but you got to see our doctor first. Is that a problem where VBA does not accept what a VHA doctor says is a problem with that particular veteran?
I don't think that's so much a problem.
Does it occur?
I'm not so sure that it occurs as you're asking me, unless I misunderstood that you're asking if the veteran goes to a VHA doctor and that doctor informs the veteran that he may or she may be eligible for benefits. I'm not sure that occurs.
Yes.
It should occur, but there's a disconnect between VHA and VBA in that particular regard. So as far as the information coming in from VHA to VBA to satisfy their needs for the claim, that is one of the primary reasons why DBQs are being, why they were created, was to streamline that process because it answers the questions that the rater needs. I should say the physician is answering questions that the rater needs that are rating specific. So whether or not, I don't know, I haven't talked to any VHA physicians to know what their thoughts are on the DBQs.
The American Legion.
There's the question evinces perhaps a misunderstanding of the relative roles between physicians and the decision makers. Physicians, of course, so they're trained to diagnose and treat disabilities, medical conditions of all kinds. Within VHA, that's what they do. The disconnect here, though, is where is the decision made that disability is somehow related to service. That's a legal decision, and that's in the hands of VBA rating specialists. So the medical information is provided to them. They look at the entire record, the nature of the service the veteran had while they were in the military, and then they determine whether it's more likely than not, sometimes based on medical opinion, but sometimes based on the evidence alone, whether that disability should be service-connected.
Okay. So as far as I understand correctly, so you don't think there's a problem between a VBA doctor questioning the medical problems with a particular veterans versus what a VHA doctor might have said? You don't think they're duplicative in that regard?
No, I don't think that there's a real duplication there. VHA doctors normally treat, and the VHA doctors or contract physicians that do compensation or pension examinations are often the same doctors, however, doing a more administrative kind of examination.
Okay. Are there any successful pilot programs that the VA has implemented as part of a comprehensive plan that have been successful but have not been well utilized through the VA system? I know they do a lot of pilot programs. We'll start with Mr. Hall and work down.
I think yes. I think the FDC program is an example of that that's currently operating. I don't have the latest statistics on that, but it definitely is something, one of the more positive pilot programs that have been instituted.
Yeah. I also believe the integration lab as a concept has worked well, at least in the areas it's been tested, particularly the express lane and the fast track processes where you have a situation where there may be a terminal illness, ALS, for example, at issue. Our service officers have enjoyed being able to quickly get these claims adjudicated. The interim pay initiative has worked well also. So I think the iLab concept offers promise. And I'll just quickly remark on your earlier question about the VHA-VBA collaboration. I do think there is some sense, at least in my experience, that the VHA doctors are not inclined to get involved with the benefit side of things. That's just one thought. The other thought I have is the problem may lie with the raters who see the VBA physician's expertise or opinion as superior to a VHA doctor because of that treating physician relationship. There's almost a sense that because this person treats this veteran, they're going to be overly deferential in their medical opinion. So that's something that probably would be good to address to your question.
I'd also like to comment on his statement about VBA and VHA. One of the problems out there that I've seen is when we get a specialist, a private specialist doctor out there who diagnoses and makes the links to the military service, has reviewed everything the VBA requests, but then there's something that's missing, and then they go with an opinion of a VHA doctor or a VHA nurse practitioner. Nothing against nurse practitioners or PAs, but they take the opinion of the PA or NP over a specialist, such as a pulmonary specialist. That is very frustrating for the veteran when they go out there and they see the specialist. And then the VBA turns around and says, well, you know, you see that doctor all the time, so of course they're going to be more biased towards what you want. And of course, in my circumstances, that's when I have to go the appeal route. So, and then we're successful that way. But it's very frustrating that way. And if we could just do the DBQs, sometimes when the DBQs first came out, not all VHA facilities accepted those or would do them. Now, we have many veterans out there who rely on the VHA for their primary care because they can't afford private health care. So we have to work with the local VHAs also. So I hope that answers partially.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes for questions. I want to start with Mr. Hall, and you can all weigh in on this, but dealing specifically with DBQs, and I have 3 questions. I'm going to get them all out and let you answer each one of them. Have DBQs been effective in ensuring that adequate medical evidence is available to rate a veteran's disability, and how effective have they been thus far in improving the claims process? And based on your experience, are fully developed claims processed more quickly than traditional claims? And if so, by how many days? Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding whether DBQs are adequate, we haven't seen enough of them to know. So I have to rely on the feedback I get from those individuals that work closely with them, the VA raters, the RVSRs. One of the major frustrations they have is that it seems that they feel that the DBQ is longer and more cumbersome to use. It takes just a longer amount of time for the physician to complete, and maybe they're skipping things on there because they don't have the time to go through. So the complexity of it may be in question. As far as those that have been approved, I apologize, I don't have that statistic either to know how these have impacted the outcomes of ratings specifically. And as far as the FDC, yeah, it's intended to process claims quicker, to get them through with wait times. I'm not sure. I didn't look specifically at that in preparation for today's testimony to know what the overall processing time for FDCs are. I think, ideally, I think it's supposed to be claims decided within 120 days. I think they may still be around that particular time, but it just depends on where they're utilizing those forms, whether it's all stations or just select stations.
Mr. Menard, anything to add?
As far as DBQs are concerned, when they're received in a totally complete form, they can be very effective in moving that claim ahead more quickly, especially in an office that accepts privately completed DBQs. It can save both time and significant resources in VBA. This is one of the things that here in Washington they've pushed ahead with DBQs because they can save significant amount of resources both in VHA and VA, not just in man hours but also claims processing time. The problem is that as they develop some of them are very simple. You want to find range of motion of an arm, you've got just a couple of measurements to take. On the other hand, if you're looking at more complex disabilities, those questionnaires can go to many pages. And even if electronically completed, they can still be difficult for the examiner to fill out. Now, this is where the DBQs, however, are I think, the forerunner of what may eventually help VA become a lot more efficient. And that is, they're collecting this data in discrete form, and they can eventually, the plan is to eventually take that data, directly dump it into the VBA system, so that if the exam were done on you or I, then there's no printing of paper, there's no interaction. If it is that simple range of motion, then those measurements can go right in, and the computer can be programmed to propose an evaluation that's appropriate for the individual. So the potential here is to use these tools to help speed up processing and eliminate handoffs and eliminate potential for input errors and so on. So the potential here is really good, but they still have a lot of work to do on these, and I believe they know that.
Right. Mr. Damascus?
Yeah, concerning the DBQs, they're so fairly new that, but I believe that if the right blocks were in there, such as providing a nexus statement, making sure that the private doctor understands what a nexus, I'm sure that they do, but I mean, making sure that they understand that it needs to relate back to the military service or a service-connected condition that's already granted. I think that would be a great step forward. The only thing, another concern I have is that there's 71 out there on the website, but I hear that there's over 80 DBQs, and why aren't the other DBQs releasable to the veteran? If, like, say, for mental health, they didn't see anything for mental health. If a veteran has seen his or her own psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is using the DSM-4, why not allow that psychiatrist to give the opinion or conclusion? For fully developed claim, yes, I have seen that in the past. Prior to me coming on to the American Legion, I was a county veteran service officer out in Minnesota, and yes, fully developed claims work very well, as long as the veteran understands what a fully developed claim is. And that's where we're going to have to take the initiative also to assist the veteran in making sure that they understand what it is. Because providing the medical documentation and the needed links to the service and whatever else is out there, as long as we're guiding the veteran, as long as the veteran comes and sees us and the veteran is cooperative with us too, the claims do go through. I mean, I've witnessed claims going as fast as 45 days through the St. Paul Regional Office, which was very great Veterans are very helpful and they're very thankful for stuff like that. But in turn, also, I've seen fully developed claims take up to 6 months. And then, of course, 1 or 2 that took a little over a year because of need to be further developed. So with that, yeah, the fully developed claim does work as long as everybody's on board and everybody's working together towards it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Gilmas, I'm going to have to refrain from you. I want to make sure all the members get a chance to weigh in on this. With that, I will recognize Mr. McNerney for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's really no doubt in my mind that members of the VA that are going to sit in front of us today and sit in front of us on all these panels, and the people that work at the VA want nothing more than to serve the veterans the best they can. Most of the members of the VA feel that way. Most of the members I've talked to, very committed to our veterans, and yet these problems persist. So I take Mr. Hall's comment about some loss between the top level and the bottom level, and then we see a protest at the Columbia, South Carolina regional office. Is in private industry, there's usually a culture where suggestions from the bottom are encouraged and they're considered carefully and put into effect if they look like they're going to do any good. Have any of you noticed whether there's a culture in any of the regional offices that encourages suggestions from the line members, from the workers that are actually doing the claims?
Several years ago, VBA here in Washington undertook basically suggestion campaigns with employees in the field, and they collected hundreds of ideas and evaluated them and piloted quite a number of them. However, that was from the top down. In terms of at the regional office, the offices I've been in, they're so focused on production, so focused on moving things along, even as inefficiently as they might do that. That's what they're focused on. So they don't have time, or they think they don't have time, to both solicit and then evaluate local ideas for improvement.
Well, it might be that in regional offices that some suggestions could be implemented. The directors have flexibility, or would have flexibility to implement suggestions and see what works locally. Do you think there's an important need for a uniform set of guidelines across all the regional offices, or do you think that some regional offices would benefit from different guidelines? Mr. Hall?
Thank you for the question. I think it really depends on what we're talking about. I mean, there are certain things that need to be standardized. And such as training. Training has got to be standardized across the board. That's something that should not be deviated from station to station. As far as something that affects how a particular regional office goes, no, I don't think that, and nor am I suggesting that VBA leadership micromanage each regional office. I mean, that's what a director is supposed to do. But when they make decisions such as creating a workaround solution completely far and away from the VBMS and what it's intended to do, that is something, again, where the leadership must step in and say, hey, listen, this is way too important for you guys to be coming up with your own solution here. Why do we have somebody leaving the building and going to another building to review a paper copy of something that's supposed to be electronic? Let's get the resolution to the access resolved, or let's resolve the access issue. So there are certain things that must be standardized, such as training and maybe process. But, as far as individuals being listened to in the regional office also, I mean, that's where the innovation kind of things come from, such as the SNLs, I think, was developed out of suggestions from one local VA regional office, which then it was built upon. We're just not happy with the quality of it at this point, but the fact is that, yes, I think things are listened to, but it probably depends on, I don't know, are working conditions or morale issues being listened to? That I couldn't say, but some things are.
Sure. Mr. Gillums, you seem anxious.
Yeah, I think variability has plagued VA for some time, and I've appreciated that both as a user and a representative. I think the problem here is I take a different tack. Maybe the reason why we have all these pilots I think it's like 45 up to this point, is because we're listening to too many other voices. And maybe at the tactical level that's appropriate, but I think at the strategic level, there has to be some certainty about the direction that VA needs to go in, and that's probably why we have these fits and starts as it was characterized earlier. I think a more decisive strategy is probably in order, and maybe tactically you can have the various stations decide what's best because of maybe the regional issues that characterize their work. But I'm more inclined to look for a more clear, cohesive strategy than to add more layers to the range of possibilities. And that's I articulated that in my written statement, and I think that's probably one of the issues here with the number of initiatives we're looking at.
Mr. Manar, do you think that some of the regional offices would benefit from these different pilots that are out there now, or some of those underperforming offices in particular?
I think underperforming offices are deserving, first of all, underperforming in quality are deserving of extreme attention by both their own management and also VBA management here in Washington. It's my understanding that there's a program underway right now to retrain the staff in several regional offices because they've had problems in recent years, and we view that as a good thing. There's been too little attention paid to quality within VBA because of this overriding focus on production. In terms of pilots, sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. A couple of years ago, there were many more pilots underway than are currently working, and I think that it, as exciting or energetic as it might have seemed at the time, it wasn't very productive, and many of those have been dialed back at this point and terminated. So it's VBA needs to keep its focus on quality while pursuing this modernization program. And the more attention to quality, you're going to ultimately, no matter how long it takes to work the case, eventually veterans are going to get decisions that are appropriate and legally correct, and eventually you're going to see appeals begin to fall. If veterans become convinced that the decisions they're receiving, whether they like them or not, are legally correct. But that's a long haul, and I think that but it's got to start somewhere, and the more VBA focuses on quality, the better the organization will be down the road, and the better veterans will be.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Rowe from Tennessee is recognized.
Just a couple of very, very quick things. One, I could not agree more with Mr. Demetrius, and I'm sorry I missed you all's testimony, but I have read it. I had another meeting to go to. I think one of the irritating things for me as a veteran and then as a physician outside the VA, you should be able to make a determination if you have a qualified physician. And what I've noticed in my own hometown is that we have a number of doctors who've retired from their medical practice and gone to the VA, and the day before they're out in private practice, their opinion is not as good as it is the next day. They just go over to the VA and start working. I've seen that. I can name you 15 people I know right now that have done that in my own hometown. So I agree with you. I don't know how to get by that, where a veteran goes out and sees someone, has a rating by a specialist, and goes back and is reevaluated by someone at the VA, and that decision is overturned. I don't know how you get by that, but we should. I totally agree with that. I think I'd like to see one of those questionnaires just so that I could go through it and see how hard it is to do. And, yeah, I'd like to look at one of them. At the end of the day, I'd like to have that and just myself run through it and see how hard it is to do. And then lastly, we talked about this a lot, and it is an enormous, and the next a couple of panels are going to tell us, it is an enormous job that they have. I mean, when you look at the amount of paperwork and stuff they have to get, information they have to evaluate, it is enormous. And I've done that, changed from a paperless to try to make it better. And what I discovered in my own practice was the paperless part actually slowed me down a little bit. to begin with until you get familiar with it. So I think the learning curve on their part is understandable. At least we had a much smaller bite, just 70,000 charts. They have millions of, maybe even billions of pieces of paper. I don't know, but lots. So what would you all do? I mean, I have some ideas about what to do. They have ideas, but you that deal with it every day, what would you do to speed it up? I'm going to put the ball in your lap.
Well, one of the things I would do if I was in charge, which I'm not, but if I was in charge, is contract with the one company. I mean, find that one company. I mean, right now, they got so many different software programs that they have to bounce in and out of. I'm talking to the lowest level workers, you know, and it's frustrating from them. I mean, it was frustrating for me as I called down to the VA from my office when I was in Minnesota, and they were like, oh, it's not there. Hold on, let me check this other screen. Oh, hold on, it's not there. Let me check this other screen. Or if you call the 1-800 number, you know, they're going off of one screen that's not, it's updated by the human factor. And when a veteran's calling, it's very frustrating to them. So, because they don't have the information right there at hand. I mean, for instance, I would submit a form in support of a veteran's claim that was filed a while ago. Veteran calls the 1-800 number, and the person at the other end goes, nope, wasn't submitted. Well, what's the veteran going to think of me? I'm not doing my job. So I have to sit there face-to-face with the veteran, arguing with the veteran, yes, I did send it. Yes, sir, I did. Yes, ma'am, I did send it. So I have to double-check. I have to take a time out of my day to double-check to make sure that it is within the VA system. So, and normally
why would that happen? Not to interrupt. Why would that happen? I mean, you're sitting there as a veteran service officer. You take the information. You're trying to help the veteran get their claim. It goes in. Why would that happen?
Multiple factors in there. I mean, it gets to the mailroom, and we don't know I don't know the procedures of the mailroom, and then once it gets up to wherever it goes from there, and then who's entering into the computer, I'm not sure. I apologize, but I cannot answer that for the VA's.
So you think you think part of the problem, and well, of course we'll have Mr. Baker in a little bit to answer the software issue, but do you think it's part of that is it's just a program that they've got multiple different ones that don't work as well as they should?
Right. It could be just the software program itself. I mean, right now we're looking at VBMS, but we're also looking at SEP and e-benefits. How are those three going to connect together? SEP, the Stakeholders Enterprise Portal, will be able to scan stuff, upload it into the VA system, but where is it going to go? Is it going to go into VBMS, or is it going to go, you know, I mean, I don't know. I can't answer those questions. I got a lot of questions, but I can't answer them. So,
okay.
You know, I mean, the SEP is going to be, we've seen it. It looks like it's going to be great, and we're hoping that it's going to be great, but is it going to solve everything? You know, we could do it electronically. We could submit everything, scan it in right there with the veteran, scan it in, automatically sees that we submitted it.
And at least ours didn't work quite that well. I'll yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Michigan, Dr. Benishek, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frankly,
excuse me.
I'd like to.
My mistake.
Pardon?
I want to recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to start by also referencing the article on the protest by the VBA workers, and I do this because my first contact with the VA was in 1974. I got out of the Army in August of '68, and in 1974 had the first contact. But the issue here, 35, 40 years later, appears to be the same, and that is that according to these workers, they said, and quoting them, says, processing a claim has become increasingly segmented, with files passing through several hands before being denied or approved, which leads to no one being held accountable for mistakes because so many people are involved in. I went through this because in 1974, no one has a record of my initial medical issue with the VA. And I understand back then they were paper files. They had boxes and boxes of records. I was sent from El Paso to Albuquerque, so that increases the likelihood of something being misplaced or lost. But here, decades later, in the age of technology, in the age of computerization, at least it boggles my mind that we can't simplify things like a questionnaire that I have seen and is extremely complex. I can't, in my own mind, resolve the issue that my colleague mentioned about not accepting a medical opinion within the same agency. And then when the ranking member talks about a dysfunctional system where yet one more, not one more pilot, but one more series of pilots, which you have commented on, are proposed in an effort to get to transformation. In your opinion, what does VBA actually need to do to get to real transformation in an era of advanced technology, in an era of a secretary that I know is very serious about doing whatever is necessary to get veterans taken care of, and where funding has been provided to our largest federal agency? And I ask that question as a veteran who today has a VA account. And I can certainly sympathize with veterans that come to my office and come to me personally, and I can tell you they are very frustrated at the cyclical merry-go-round that they're forced to go through that subjects them to long waiting periods, subjects them to conflicting even medical opinions, and then the most frustrating part is that when the system questions their veracity, even after having put their lives on the line in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and as far back as Vietnam. So what do we need to do, in your opinions? You've been at this for a while, as the ranking member mentioned. What do we need to do to get real transformation done? How do we get accountability? How do we get that vital service to veterans? You guys represent national organizations. I'm a member of your organizations. What do we need to do?
I find it interesting that in the appellate realm, where of course a lot of wrongs are righted, there's no way to take what we learned at that level, why a decision was wrong, and then apply it proactively to the process. Of course, in law, a lot of these decisions have precedential value, but there's no precedential value to a decision at the appellate level that will inform how we should be doing things, how we should adapt the system, things that are fundamental to the process, reasonable or benefit of the doubt. That's so fundamental to the process. That speaks to whether you should be able to come in with an opinion that's valid on its face and apply it to a claim, but that doesn't happen. That goes to the culture, of course. We talked about that earlier. But I think becoming an adaptive organization, an organization that understands its vulnerabilities, and again, I'll harken back to the to the board and what it could teach us. Maybe have those decisions carry some precedential value, and maybe have the leaders understand that a lot of these appeals happen a lot of times because of poor development, misapplication of law, and as long as that happens and we're ignoring that, then we're missing out on an opportunity to fix the system.
You covered so many things, and unfortunately we don't have the time to talk about all of them. I'm reminded, years ago I had an opportunity to visit a countrywide mega call center out in Simi Valley, California, and you walked in this giant warehouse, and people are in their little cubicles, and they're all answering the questions of people who are about mortgages. And at one point we asked about problem resolution. So they took us over to to a corner of the facility, and there's another set of cubicles identical to all the rest, and they said this is the office of the director, and when a regular agent can't complete the action that is necessary here, they refer them to these folks over here, and quite often the customer is satisfied with the resolution after they talk to somebody in the office of the president. Well, it turns out, I asked the question, well, what extraordinary powers do they have? And they said, well, they don't have any extraordinary powers. But what they understand is the powers that they do have. Many VA employees operate, when they're making decisions, operate within what they think they know, a range of what's, I can make a decision in favor of the veteran, this would be between these parameters. But if they really understood, if they were really properly trained and experienced, they would understand that they've got this much authority, that the people on the margins can receive the benefits that they're entitled to under the law. But because of inadequate training, inadequate preparation, inadequate supervision, inadequate review of the quality of their work, people continue operating within a much narrower parameter than they can legally do so. And that's the challenge within VBA. One of the things that I've talked to General Hickey about and other leaders in VBA over the years is this concept of a second signature on ratings. Right now, in many instances, a rating specialist goes ahead and makes a decision, and unless that decision gets picked up on quality review, and only a small number of those do get picked up on quality review, there's no check on whether that decision is correct or not. And as a consequence, the individual, when they get that single signature authority, stops learning, stops growing, because nobody ever comes back and says, you could have made a different decision here based on the same facts and the same law. So that's a challenge that VA has, and I think that's something that they really need to tackle, figure out how they can improve the quality of review at the local level. Now, they've started doing it recently by instituting what they call quality review teams in regional offices. How that's going to work out, I think it's still too early to tell because they are really very new. But the decision makers need that additional feedback so they can continue to grow and learn. The system, as Congressman Filner points out, is incredibly complex, and all of us who work with veterans benefits, if we don't learn something new every day, then it's a day wasted. There's something to learn new every day, and it's the job of VBA and it's the job of us who help train our own service officers to ensure that our people are learning every day so that we can help veterans.
Gentleman yields back. Now the gentleman from Michigan, Dr. Benishek, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, frankly, I want to associate myself with the outrage of Mr. Filner because of the fact that, this bureaucracy is so difficult to get a handle on. And I heard, I've been conducting these like veteran roundtables where I have VSOs around my district come. We have these little meetings, and what are some of the ideas that they have? And frankly, one of the guys put together an idea that I didn't have a good argument with, and it kind of comes back a little bit to Mr. Filner's. The audiology, hearing loss and tinnitus is like 30% of the claims, as I understand it. And it's such a simple thing to document. For example, the guy either was exposed to a situation that could cause him hearing loss or not. And there's a simple test to determine if you have a hearing loss. So there's two things that are easily documented. Why does that take 18 months to get the determination that there's a disability? Now, there's been some arguments about for and against that, and maybe it's the cost or but to me, it seemed like a real good question from this VSO. Why can't that just be determined to be a hearing loss and the guy gets his benefit? Now, I mean, he might have other issues that require further investigation, and I can understand that, and maybe that gets put in the list with the other one. But why shouldn't something like this simply be granted? Now, I would like to hear your comments on that. You know, what are the downsides to that? Are there any downsides to it? I couldn't see any. Mr. Hall?
It's not that we're not outraged about simple things, what appears to be simple things, like if you have the evidence. Again, a fully developed claim is a prime example, which I cited, and Congressman Filner had responded to or commented about. It's not that we're not outraged by it. Something simplistic such as hearing loss, where, again, there's no subjectivity from a rater.
Right. I mean, that's why shouldn't that just be granted?
Right. There shouldn't be. DIC claims. There's another one that really doesn't take a whole lot of burial allowance. There's a lot of them that are still caught up in this 900,000 plus backlog of what's referred to as a backlog, but there are claims that could be plucked out easily. I think that's
what the question is there anything wrong with the scenario that I said, should we just grant these benefits to that simple case? I mean, what is the downside to that? Is there a downside to it? Like I said, I couldn't see one. Do you see one?
I don't really see a downside to your suggestion.
Right.
You know, as far as granting all claims, I don't know that that's feasible.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, if we simplify 30% of the claims are hearing loss, that would free up a lot of people to work on other things. It seems to me.
Agreed.
Mr. Manner, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, I do. First, there's a couple of things here. First of all, to your idea, your ideas and suggestions. Right now, in order to service connect a hearing loss or any disability, there are three things that need to be done. You have to have an event in service, you have to have a present disability, and then you have to have a medical nexus, a doctor's opinion that connects the two. Many veterans who were exposed to extreme noise while they were in service, because of inadequacy of testing, when they were getting out, if they got a test at all, it showed that they had normal hearing. Well, doctors know that it's not normal if you test at a high enough level. If you test at the 6,000 hertz level or the 8,000 hertz level, then you're going to see very early, what they call an acoustic notch, a problem with hearing that's caused by noise exposure.
Well, I just want to, so it's not as simple as I said then? I mean,
there's two things that can be done. The VFW, and I believe, I could be wrong, but the independent budget, which is made up of 4 major service organizations, have proposed for years that a presumption be created that would assume this medical nexus where somebody is either in combat or in a job in the service that exposes them to loud noises, and they now have a present hearing loss. If they get the presumption, then VA can move very quickly to grant service connection. That would either take legislation or it would take action by the VA to create the presumption. The other thing that VA can do for future veterans, and I've talked to a high-level VA official who actually presented this to me, and he said they've considered changing testing levels for veterans who are service members who are coming out of service to test at this 6,000 or 8,000 hertz level, and then change the law so that if they have a hearing loss at that point, a very high frequency hearing loss, VA would automatically grant service connection. Now, it might be 20 years or 30 years before they have a hearing loss that is compensable, but once they have that compensable hearing loss, you don't have this big, long this huge requirement of a medical opinion. You've already got service connection. You say, okay, what do the numbers show? You assign whatever evaluation is appropriate based on the numbers. So there's a couple of approaches to this, presumptions and changing testing at discharge so future veterans can be treated much more fairly and justly.
Oh, I think I'm out of time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Walls, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you to all of you for being here. And it goes without saying the frustration level for everyone in here is high. I understand that. I also think it's very evident that everyone in here's goal is to serve our veterans with the best possible care and best service they can get, and try and figure that out.
we all do know it's a zero-sum proposition. If one gets through or 900,000 get through without being taken care of at the proper level, there's going to be frustration. So I think we're going to hear from some folks, we're going to hear from VA folks, but I think it's important to keep in mind when General Hickey gets up here and testifies, somebody spent a lifetime as a in the military and understands this, and the folks who work in the VA and the folks who are processing these claims in many cases are veterans too. So with that being said, I share that frustration. I think the issue we have to come to grips with is it's not mutually exclusive to care for veterans in a timely, efficient, and good manner and also be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. This is the part that always troubles me, and I have to be honest with you, we're not a business. We're not a business, so we shouldn't oversimplify on that. We can't go the way of some businesses. We can't become Enron in the VA or whatever it is. We have to maintain excellence, but there is things we should learn on best practices and how we get there. And the ranking member's frustrations are, I think he's exactly right, and I feel that with him too, that it's just, why are we not demanding this get done? Because I know there are professionals like General Hickey in there. I know they go up and down the line. I know our VSOs are unwavering supporters. And I know there's good members of Congress that want to get this fixed. The will of the American public is there. And I think we should try and shoot for something grand. I think we should try and fix this dang thing. If not us, who's going to do it? We've been at this for so long. And so that's why I'm looking for all of you. And I'm pretty much, to be honest with you, I'm willing to try anything to get through this. You know, I was willing to go with the brute force way of getting it through or whatever. I also think we should take responsibility, and I have pride that we did the right thing with Agent Orange claims, but we added to that backlog. We put those in there, and we did that. We made the presumptions on PTSD and some of those things. That's the right thing to do. But again, we need to plan accordingly. I think we all here need to take some responsibilities. We didn't know we were going to have a lot of veterans from these wars. We didn't know we had aging veterans. Plan ahead accordingly and figure that part out. So I have a couple things I want to ask about. We're trying to do the benefits delivered at discharge, the paperless initiative, which is one of the programs we're trying to get. Hopefully that's the goal is to get there. That will bring down the claims and all that. But I have to tell you, my county veteran service officers are at the point now they're recommending the veteran wait until they get back home to start the claim. They said it's too much of a hassle, they can't get it or whatever. And I just want to ask you guys what you think on this level of a little, 30,000 foot. You think that's good advice they're giving at this point? Or is that still stymieing the chance to move to that transformational level of whatever that is, as the ranking member said? So anyone who wants to try that.
I've had this conversation with several of our service officers. And although we have not taken a position nationally on it, I'm certainly not telling our service officers that they should not be telling veterans or service members that they need to go through the BDD program rather than wait. Right now, the BDD program and the Quick Start programs for active duty service members who are getting out are broken, to be honest. And in many regional offices, new veterans will get faster service if they wait a few days until they're discharged.
Do you believe by us not participating or advising our, my constituents and our, CVSOs and VSOs back home or whatever, are we stymieing the chance to get to that? Because I'm certainly not one who's stuck in the status quo. I have to tell you, I'm leaning more towards this big change that the ranking member's saying, that we have to get there. But I want to do it in a manner that's responsible, that's systematic and all that. I wanted to believe this was the way to go, but the folks on the front lines of the processing are telling me it's simply maybe not there. So are we going to hang on to BDD for the next 20 years and continue to try and reform it? Or is this just a natural growing pain? I'm really struggling with this one.
Well, I think part of it's a growing pain. They started the BDD program in Winston-Salem and moved it to Salt Lake City, and they didn't have the infrastructure. We're talking about VBMS. They didn't have the tools. They didn't have the system that would support this program. They didn't realize that when you're not just dealing with a few pieces of paper. When you're scanning them and putting them in the system, it's millions and probably billions at this point of paper. And they didn't have the system to support it. Things ran slowly, and so. Even if VA employees could work at a higher speed, there was a long period when they could not, simply because they could, go out and get a cup of coffee between actions.
Mr. Chairman, could I have just a little time if anybody else wants to quickly answer? 30 seconds.
I remind the gentleman we have 4 panels here today.
I yield my time.
Gentleman from Indiana, recognize Mr. Sussman.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to just go ahead and yield back, but I would like to say this because I had to step out for a short budget committee meeting. But from the conversations I've heard, I hope that, and it feels like this committee is determined to make sure this gets right, and I'm willing to help do that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Gentlemen, on behalf of the committee, I thank you for your testimony and your service to our nation's veterans, and you are excused. And our second panel will please come to the witness table. The U.S. National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA, has been an integral and temporary player in the scanning component of VBMS. In the second panel, we welcome Mr. William Bozanko, Executive Agency Services at NARA. Mr. Bozanko, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Filner, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to this hearing, and thank you for all that you do to honor and support our nation's veterans. The National Archives has a long and proud history of supporting our veterans. Every day we assist veterans and their families by providing them with the records necessary to prove military service in order to claim a benefit or receive an honor. Our National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri holds approximately 60 million official military personnel files, and we respond to more than 1 million requests for these records every year. Here at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and College Park, Maryland, we permanently archive and provide access to the historical records of our armed services that document the actions and heroism of many generations of military veterans from the Revolutionary War to present times, so that historians, filmmakers, and genealogists can tell the stories of those who have served. I would also like to add that NARA, an agency of approximately 3,000 employees, is proud to employ over 480 veterans, including the Archivist of the United States, David Ferriero. VBA has a primary role to play in serving our nation's veterans. Its mission is to provide veterans, service members, and their families with access to the benefits to which they are entitled. Central to this mission is the VBA claims process. The VBA is building a new electronic system, VBMS, to transform the paper-intensive process into a faster, more efficient, and secure paperless system. One aspect of building VBMS and speeding the claims process involves the digitization of paper claims. In 2010, the VBA approached NARA for advice on how to employ scanning technology and apply proven records management practices to scan and automatically extract data from paper claims forms. NARA had recently undertaken a successful project to digitize civilian official personnel folders at the National Personnel Records Center. As part of this project, we had employed cutting-edge technology that has the ability to scan a form and to learn where to look on the form to extract the necessary data. This technology had the potential to be useful for extracting data from VBA paper claims forms. NARA entered into a one-year agreement with the VA in June of 2010 to help design a scanning architecture and a process that would meet VBA's particular needs. Under this agreement, NARA mapped out a scanning workflow for claims processing, configured a scanning system, trained the system to recognize the data on VBA's forms, and developed a way to index the data so that it could be efficiently retrieved when needed. NARA also agreed to perform low-volume physical scanning of paper documents and hired a limited number of temporary employees to manually scan paper VBA forms. A pilot of the system was successfully tested in 2 VA regional offices, demonstrating that the architecture and process had potential to meet VBA's needs. Based on the success of the first pilot, NARA signed a second 1-year agreement with the VA in June of 2011 to further refine the scanning workflow and hardware configuration, and to continue to improve the system's ability to automatically recognize and compile data from paper VBA forms. We successfully pilot tested these refinements in 2 additional VA offices. The system can now recognize and compile data from 170 different VBA document types. NARA and VBA have demonstrated that the system can handle the scanning of up to 600,000 images a month from claims supplied by 5 VA facilities, 4 regional offices, and a records management facility. We are nearing our completion of meeting the requirements to the VA under the terms of these 2-year-long agreements. Our current agreement with the VA ends on June 26, 2012. Thank you again for inviting me to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank the gentleman for his testimony, and the chair will begin with questions. First, let me say the committee greatly appreciates your agency's service to our nation's veterans. I think that being said, is the mission of the National Archives to preserve and protect American history. While technology is an important element of such process, NARA does not serve as the primary scanning operation for either itself nor other government agencies. Can you please describe how NARA became involved in VBA's VBMS program, and then how it has developed the technology used by VBMS, and finally its current role? I know you touched on it in your testimony, but how did they approach you in the whole process?
Thank you, Chairman Runyon. Essentially, we had previously had this effort with the Office of Personnel Management to scan civilian official personnel files and extract the necessary information off of those forms and make it available. Based on the success of that, we were approached by VBA. I think we also have a clear tie-in with the VA's business process, given all of our work at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis.
I think the one question on everybody's mind, and you just brought it up, what happens June 27th, which happens to be next Wednesday as this contract expires?
So let me be very clear. The National Archives absolutely recognizes the significance of the support that we're providing. We're playing a very small but very important and critical role in supporting the VBA in this effort. In no way would we envision turning off, if you will, the service delivery that we are providing right now with VBA to veterans that are being served by those 4 facilities. So we're working with the VA to ensure that essentially there's no change on June 27th, that service delivery continues as it does today, and then figure out a mechanism to continue to support and ramp down our engagement as they build up private sector capability.
That being said, how many SES level meetings has NARA had with the VA about the process in light of this date looming here next week? And when were they initiated? Because what I've heard that they haven't, discussions really haven't came about until this hearing was actually called.
So we received a request from the VA for production level scanning back in May. Prior to that, in the prior year, there had not been any senior level engagement between the VA and NARA. Excuse me. The pilot was able to work at the staff level. We received a new performance work statement on June 11th, and based on that, in the last couple of weeks, we've been working much more closely with the VA to make sure that there's a clear path forward.
Thank you for that. With that, I'll recognize the ranking member from California, Mr. Filner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much was NARA paid for those 2 years?
So the 2 years combined, the total cost to the VA for our services was $9.7 million.
All right, $10 million. When I hear all this stuff, by the way, I figure I could give $1 million to some 20-year-old geek and he'd solve it within a few weeks. So I just don't understand all this. This is not rocket science here. We know how to do this stuff. And why aren't you continuing into another year?
I just want to be clear, we are continuing our work. We don't want to...
You don't have a contract?
We don't have a current agreement.
So why don't you have an agreement?
We're working with the VA right now to finalize their requirements and what our response will be to those.
So you've set up a system at these regional offices to do this. How many employees do you think are going to be needed to do the job? And why can't you do it?
So we presently have 60 people that are working on the projects, and those are sufficient for the work that we're doing. If your question is what would it take to do more,
my question is, what the VA's question is, how we got 1 million backlog claims. How many people do you need to scan this within 2 weeks or a month or 2 months? I don't care. How many people do you need to do it? You already have a system which took 2 years to give us an answer. I could have given you the answer in a week, I tell you, but it took you 2 years. How many people is it going to take to do all the scanning that has to be done?
So the National Archives doesn't intend to do all the scanning.
Have you estimated how many employees it would take to do it?
For us to do the full 60 million pages a month, our model looked at a figure of around 4,000 employees.
So we need another 4,000 employees to do this. Hello? I mean, do I have to say any more? This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You spent 2 years, you're telling us, or no, you're not telling us, your agency said now we need 4,000 more to do the job. We don't have any budget, I'm sure. General Hickey is not going to tell us we need 4,000 more employees. I don't know how we're going to do your job that you and your testimony, Secretary, that we're going to have to do this by 2015. But I don't get it. I mean, I'm not saying you're responsible. I just don't understand that we contracted for $10 million for you to give an answer that we can do this with 4,000 more employees. There's no way they're going to hire 4,000 more employees. So how long do you think this is going to take? Another 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Which is why I go back to the so-called Bilmes plan. We're not going to do this by brute force. Now we're going to need another 4,000. We've already hired 12,000 in the last few years. I thank you for your work, but I mean, I could have predicted 2 years ago if I that it's going to be exactly this, and we know how to do this. This is not rocket science. Scanning is, I could go into my office and scan anything I want right now, and I could pick out anything I want to scan, and I could take any veteran who comes into my office and do the scanning. I mean, we can do this. We don't need all these thousands of employees and bureaucracy after bureaucracy after bureaucracy. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. One of the VFW, is Mr. Menard still here? Said, I don't want to blow up the system. Your testimony, read your testimony. It needs to be blown up. I will tell you. I rest my case.
The gentleman yields back, and I remind the gentleman that NARA by no way is asking for more employees.
I didn't suggest that. I asked him how many would he estimate would be needed to do the job, not by him, but by the VA.
I think the next question, I think the biggest question on this is what is the VA asking needs to be scanned, and where do we draw the line on, are we going backwards into the files, are we moving forward? I think that is the biggest question that the VA has to answer, is what is their need on how to move this process forward. With that, yield to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Sutzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bisanco, thank you for being here and for what you all are trying to accomplish. I guess my question is why isn't there a contract renewed? Is it a hang-up on the VA side, your side? Why isn't there a renewed contract?
Thank you, Congressman Stutzman. We received a performance work statement on June 11th. At this time, it's a matter of us working through that, making sure that we are going to be able to deliver on the things that we're being asked to perform, figuring out what the cost of those things would be. It's actually an interagency agreement, which is a relatively fast process, so we're optimistic that in the very near future we'll be able to lock that in with the VA. But again, I just want to stress, June 27th, we're going to continue to scan the materials that are coming in.
Why isn't the contract done now? I mean, why does it have to be after the contract expires and we kind of go through this exercise? It's really pointless.
No, there's no limit. We could have done one months ago. We could do one, another one in the near future. It's just a matter of clarifying what they need us to do, and then us having the time to do the analysis.
Do you know, are the expectations in a new contract to address the million images that need to be scanned and recorded?
The materials that we've received still have us performing at up to 600,000 pages a month level. The delta between that and the 60 million that are necessary for full national rollout, I believe the VA is examining private sector solutions.
So do you have the options to use a private sector at all in addition to what you scanned? Can you take anything that is needed and get it done outside of your capabilities?
We're leveraging private sector expertise to make sure that we're using the scanning software in the most efficient, effective way, and to get advice as we work the workflow. But as far as us being a pass-through for the VA, I think the National Archives, as an agency of a total of 3,000 people, it would be far more efficient, effective for the VA to manage that part of the process.
But so there are folks that you work with in the private sector that do the same thing that National Archives is doing for the VA?
Yes, the particular software package that we use is one of the leading ones that is out there, and we are working closely with them and others that have leveraged that same software package.
So is it possible then that the VA could continue the contract with the VA and could also bring a supplemental contract with somebody in the private sector to help catch up?
I believe so.
I mean, is that being discussed at all, do you know, or is National Archives being asked to do more to catch up?
So what we're being asked to do is to continue our support to the 5 VA facilities, and then to provide some expertise to support a national rollout so that we can take the lessons learned in the rollout to the 5 facilities we've done and actually be there to help roll it out into the other VA facilities.
So the $10 million, that was a previous contract, is that right?
It was a combination of 2 one-year contracts.
2 one-year contracts. What do you expect the price tag to be on the next one-year contract, if it is a one-year contract or 2-year contract, if you know?
I actually don't know, and given the importance of this, I'd prefer to follow up with the committee in writing later.
Okay. All right. That would be helpful. Okay. Thank you. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman, yield back. Mr. Michaud is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today. You mentioned that you're doing the work for, 5 different states. From what you know about what you have been doing so far, and you look at the expertise needed to do this, do you think this is something that, for instance, that's eligible for the private sector? Is there that much capacity out there in the private sector to do this? And if not, do you think the archives in each individual state, do they have the same type of software system that's needed for this particular program that the states might be able to help out with this backlog?
So I think the state archives facilities have their own unique challenges. But I think you ask a very good question with respect to leveraging this capability and going forward. In the 5 facilities that we've deployed it, for the volume that we're doing, we believe that there's a firm foundation now for the VA to build off of, and we think there is sufficient capability in the private sector. I think as the ranking member made the point, once you figure out the basic workflow and the basic scanning, after that it's a production environment, and we think that would be very appropriate for a private sector capability.
You mentioned the states have unique challenges. You're talking about money?
I just meant that I didn't think it, at state archival institutions and don't have the kind of capability to handle this kind of scanning volume.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Walls.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you for your service on this. I'm going to make this brief. I'm getting back to this again. The archive's responsibility is just the physical handling of the paper, basically, and the scanning in a usable format. Is that correct?
I think we've done more than that. We essentially designed the scanning workflow, and we've been teaching the system to recognize where on the forms to find the data that needs to be extracted. That's a very challenging aspect of this. The concept of basic scanning is a pretty rudimentary process, but the ability to have the software find on
that's right
all the numerous iterations of forms that have been used over the decades, that is incredibly complex.
Is it hard for you to say, is necessarily having that data in a usable format, that's still not a guarantee that these will move any faster? Am I correct that if there's the decisions to make on the ratings and the decisions to make on the claims, it's not a guarantee? I mean, your assumption is like anything, productivity should increase with workflow management, but that's not a guarantee, right?
So it cuts out some of the mail time, it cuts out some of the processing time, which I think is absolutely critical to resolve, but I think you're absolutely correct.
I certainly don't want to put you on the spot to say it, but it seems to me, and you're proving it at least on some of those numbers, we should be able to be more efficient. I mean, I keep coming back to this accepting the status quo, that it's just going to take a certain amount of time. I think we can maintain those two basic things that we're trying to do: timely and appropriate care for the veterans and stewardship of the taxpayer dollars. And what you're saying is what the National Archives does is give you the tools to do that, should give you the tools to do that, correct?
Correct. The current paper-based system is inefficient. It's not secure. Moving to a paperless environment, and frankly, because of the time period that's covered, you've got paper records. You can't. This isn't all born digital. So you've got to use this sort of as a bridge to deal with the paper, and I think it does make it more efficient.
Is this the appropriate way to go about it? I mean, is this one of those situations that we're going to have to bridge the transition where we can't, scrap the whole system and start fresh? We simply have to move to that? Is that?
I think as far as trying to process things in a more efficient electronic manner, yes, you've got to bridge that gap where we have the extant paper that has to be dealt with, and it is part of the history of each claim, and it needs to be considered.
Is there any reason that this entire, and this may be going out again, do you work at all with DOD on anything, on Department of Defense, on any record management or anything?
Yes, sir, we do.
Is there any reason that we couldn't be formulating this as we always talk in this committee about seamless transition? Anyway, these couldn't be all being funneled together. Are we going to create two separate systems again with what DOD is data collection and what we're doing on these claims?
While we work with VA, with DOD on a number of efforts with respect to this particular one, our role has been limited to the immediate aspect of figuring out how to take these paper-based claims and scan them.
Because I keep coming back to it again. I appreciate this effort, but if we're going to start again, I want to start with all of it and why we're not doing the seamless transition if we've got a fresh start to try and do that. Because now, once again, I'm afraid we might get at least a fairly good, efficient system in the VA, and if we have that separate silo on the DOD side, many of those source document records have to come across the bridge that in many cases isn't there. So I know that's probably not in your lane, but I appreciate the effort to help out, and I think trying to find these solutions, and I am certainly one that's willing. If there are public-private partnerships to get this, we need to get there because it's too important to miss. So thanks for your time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Bosanko, on behalf of the committee, thank you for your testimony and your service to our veterans, and you are now excused, and I'll ask the third panel to please come to the witness table. The VA Inspector General's Office has been conducting audits of the VA's regional offices and its appeals and management process. Today on our third panel, we welcome Ms. Linda Halliday, Assistant Inspector General for Audits and Evaluations for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs Office of Inspector General. She's accompanied by Mr. Nick Dahl, the Director of OIG's Bedford Office of Audits and Evaluations, and Mr. Larry Rinkemeyer, Director of OIG's Kansas City Office of Audits and Evaluations. And Mr. Brent, how do you say, Arante, Director of Bay Pines Benefits Inspections Division. Ms. Halliday, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Filner, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the work of the OIG in the Veterans Benefits Administration. Delivering timely and accurate benefits to millions of veterans who served our nation is central to VA's mission. We conduct national audits of VBA's programs and inspections of individual regional offices to examine high-risk claims processing activities. We have consistently reported the need for enhanced policies and procedures, training, oversight, and quality reviews to improve the timeliness and accuracy of disability claims processing. Although VBA has briefed us on their transformational initiatives, we have not observed enough of the process to truly assess the results. Today, I want to discuss 4 areas where recent audits and inspections have consistently identified weaknesses. First, in a January 2011 report, we reported VBA did not correctly process temporary 100% evaluations for approximately 27,000 veterans. We reported that VBA paid veterans a net $943 million without adequate supporting medical evidence. And if VBA did not take corrective action, it would overpay veterans a projected $1.1 billion over the next 5 years. VBA agreed to review all temporary 100% evaluations and ensure each had a future examination date entered into their electronic record by September 30, 2011. VBA subsequently extended the national review deadline to December 31, 2011, then again to March 31, 2012, and has currently extended to June 30, 2012. VBA has not completed this national review requirement, yet monthly benefits continue to be paid despite the lack of adequate medical evidence.
Ms. I just want to clarify that. Are you saying that the entering of the date for a follow-up review for these was not done? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That's the only thing they had to do.
Right.
Gentlelady, please continue.
Our inspections continue to show the accuracy of temporary 100% evaluations remains a serious issue. We identified excessively high error rates at 3 California regional offices we recently reviewed. In addition, the San Diego regional office completed its review of VBA's temporary 100% disability evaluations, but did not take appropriate actions in 22% of the claims. Regional office management erroneously reported that they had taken corrective action when they had not. Second, we issued a report on regional offices' appeals management processes and reported a nationwide inventory of appeals increased over 30% from FY 2008 to 2010. We concluded that VBA contributed to the growing inventory and the time delays by not assigning enough staff to process appeals. The Undersecretary generally agreed that opportunities exist to improve appeals processing and stated that VBA is conducting a pilot program to assess the feasibility of implementing our recommendations. Third, we conducted an audit to provide an early assessment of VA's internal controls over the use of disability benefit questionnaires. and we found that the expedited rollout of the process did not provide VBA sufficient time to design, evaluate, and implement adequate internal controls to prevent potential fraud. It is the OIG's position that it is critical to establish adequate front-end controls to identify and minimize risks before benefit payments are initiated. Lastly, 19 of 20 regional offices inspected in FY 2011 did not follow VBA policy for processing conditions related to traumatic brain injury. The errors related to inconsistent and insufficient training, VA medical examiners providing inadequate exam reports upon which to base disability claim decisions, and raters not returning these adequate reports to the medical examiners for correction as required. We attributed the deficiencies related to training and inadequate medical examinations to a complex set of policies and procedures for processing these claims. Further, raters told us they often did not return the inadequate reports due to pressure to meet productivity standards. VBA continues to face challenges in improving the accuracy and timeliness of disability claims decisions, along with trying to manage an ever-growing backlog of claims and to maintain efficient operations. While VBA has made incremental progress through its own initiatives and in response to our prior report recommendations, more work needs to be done. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. We'd be pleased to answer any questions you or the committee has.
Thank you very much, and I will begin the questioning dealing specifically with the temporary 100% disability cases and the TBI. I think you just said in your statement, statistics are overriding the execution of the law and the benefit to make, in my view, to make the VA seem like they're doing their job. Is that a correct analysis? The statistical analysis that they can give us to say, we adjudicated these claims up or down, it seems like it's in the forefront. I always argue with the VA that ultimate goal should be customer satisfaction. And I tell me if I'm right or wrong, you just validated my point there.
My take on this is these are temporary ratings to address a medical condition at a specific period in time. They're temporary ratings because the medical condition is expected to improve, and the ratings would be readjusted down. What VBA is not doing is actively managing these temporary ratings. Their staff is not including the reevaluation or reexamination dates within their electronic system to alert the new raters to call for a medical exam and adjust these ratings. They're far more concerned with getting the...
We're basically saying that a medical condition is going to improve with time. That's how they're viewing the process.
On these 100% medical disabilities claims, yes, there is an expectation and a probability that some of these claims, the medical conditions, will improve.
And I think most of us would agree within just the human body and aging that medical conditions do not tend to get better over time. I think
an example would be prostate cancer, where the treatment has taken place, and after a period of time, whether they use seeds or whatever the treatment, the veteran is considered to be improved.
Now, is the VA actively working to implement any of your recommendations, or is it just acknowledging a mistake and continuing with the same old thing? Because I think that's the kind of feeling we get around here a lot of times.
I think at first there was some pushback to accept recommendations that we were offering, but I do believe under General Hickey we have a better working knowledge and working relationship today to implement these recommendations. And I would reference that I had issued 2 reports dealing with claims processing, where originally we got non-concurrences with recommendations, and she agreed to meetings. We resolved those issues. We found those areas of consensus so that VBA could implement the recommendations.
Well, shifting gears to DBQs and the potential for fraud there, has the VA adequately addressed the concerns of fraud there? I know there's some issues possibly with people falsifying the forms and entering doctors' license numbers. Is there a system in process besides random selection of the claims to actually make sure that that doesn't happen?
VBA has provided a long-range solution to put controls in place. Our concern is that benefits are being paid right now, and that the information that's maintained in the electronic systems for VBA does not give sufficient information to really look closely at how well or how poorly the VBA disability benefit questionnaires are improving the process. For example, the system was lacking the number of veterans who had submitted claims using DBQs, the number of claims and the amount of money awarded based on DBQs, the processing time for claims based on DBQs, and there was an inability when we looked at this process, while only 3 DBQs had been released, that the trends in DBQs with regards to locations, the same physician providing an excessive number of DBQs, which might be an indication of fraud, there was an inability to trend the information.
Thank you for that. With that, I'll recognize the ranking member, Mr. Filner.
I mean, I find your report astounding in the following way. The only justification I've ever heard for all these backlogs, it takes time, we got to be accurate, we got to have all the information, so we're supposed to be accurate. And yet we find a quarter of our things are not accurate. Now, you give the simplest thing I could ever imagine in your audit of the temporary 100% evaluation. Simplest thing. Enter the date, it says here, for a future examination on the electronic record. Hello, I could do it tomorrow. It's taken a year and a half. I'm going to ask you, Ms. Hickey, if you're going to reach that by June 30th. That's a year and a half after they asked you to do it. You still haven't done it. And now you're promising us to fix the whole claims backlog in a year and a half. How do we expect us to believe the VA? You can't even put in an evaluation date on the electronic record in a year and a half after it's been pointed out to you. The simplest thing I can imagine, I could put somebody on it tomorrow and I can do it. It'll take them a week or two. I can't believe that this simple operation is not done, which claims, I mean, we could be talking $1 billion of overpayments, which I'm not saying is happening, but that's the projection. Seems to me, if someone said to me, Bob, you could save $1 billion if you did that, I would do it in the next week. Ms. Hickey, you're coming up next. Who's responsible for this kind of sloppiness? Who is responsible for this irresponsibility? Who is, and I don't want an answer, I'm warning you. It's impersonal. The system is this, the system is that. We can't get it, you know, I want to know who is responsible, and is it you? This is ridiculous. And again, if it wasn't tragic, it would be ridiculous. Not only are we not serving the veterans, there's a potential for in a budget where we can't get millions, a few $1 million here, we could be wasting $1 billion, and nobody has decided to take any action. Again, I rest my case.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Sutzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the work that you've done with the audit and the information that you provided. You found a lot of egregious systematic failures in processing accuracy. For example, that you mentioned that you found a 30% error rate for the over 4,000 high-risk claims you reviewed at 50 regional offices. And you also mentioned that none of the offices you reviewed followed protocol in assessing temporary 100% disability cases, and only one office followed protocol for traumatic brain injury assessments. In your opinion, I mean, what is the cause of such an error rate, and is there any effort at all to fix the problem that you know of?
Well, to answer the first question on the cause, we're seeing the cause as poor and inadequate oversight of the work processes. We're often seeing that first-line supervisors are not always overseeing the work of their employees, and they're also making mistakes. The second issue would be that our benefits inspections have reported on fairly complex policies related to the traumatic brain injury claims. And these policies at times ask physicians to make medical diagnoses that are not always possible, which leads to insufficient medical exams and inaccurate disability determinations. I'll ask Mr. Brent Arante, who heads up our benefits inspections, if you want to add anything.
Mrs. Halliday is correct regarding traumatic brain injury. That policy is extremely complex. Complex to the point where it involves the physicians at the VA medical centers, where they have difficulty being able to assign specific diagnosis or even make a medical decision. So the decision is not made, then that compounds the problem when the medical examination goes to the RO for the raters to look at this evidence, evaluate it, and try to make an accurate decision. So when the evidence is not sufficient, then the decision makers use this insufficient evidence to make a decision, then a decision becomes wrong. And we see that across the board at most regional offices, as we indicated, 19 out of 20 for the TBI specifically, that these policies are just way too complex. The hospitals are having problems understanding the policies. The regional offices are having problems implementing the policies. We just need a view of these policies.
Why is it that complex?
Because traumatic brain injury has a lot of residual disabilities or disabilities associated with that event. And for example, one of the major issues we see is when there is a traumatic brain injury that may cause memory loss. There may be memory loss due to this, and the veteran also has a coexisting mental condition. Sometimes memory loss and the symptoms of memory loss can also be symptomatic of a mental condition. The physicians can't distinguish which disability to attribute that symptom to. And then that compounds the problem as the decision makers get this evidence. It kind of leaves them to guess. Okay, is this symptom related to TBI or to memory loss? Is this symptom related to a coexisting mental condition?
You mentioned, I believe that you've made a recommendation to the VA. Is that correct? You've made recommendations. Are you seeing the VA actively working to implement any of them?
Yes, we have concurrences on the recommendations. I think in some cases, General Hickey is trying to look at the pilots to make sure that the recommendations are fully implementable and that they would be, there wouldn't be any claims that you might exclude from applying the recommendations. But I think there's been a receptiveness to do that. But at the same point, there's a very significant focus on her implementing the transformational initiatives that have come up, the ideas have come up from her staff.
What about potential fraud-related cases to DBQs? Has VBA adequately addressed any of these concerns?
VBA, we had separate meetings with General Hickey on this. They have stepped up the referral process to the OIG when their star reviewers actually look at a small subset of claims to see if they might have been changed or to verify if the veteran is really a patient of the private physician, to look behind the DBQ and to ensure that it's authentic. We'd like to see a more aggressive approach to it, but they are looking at that as part of their STAR program. And they have started to implement a referral process, which we recommended to the OIG. So the OIG could screen those same DBQs and take it a step further and to see whether there should be an investigation opened.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Michel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming here once again. Looking at your testimony on page 4, you talk about that you found VARO staff did not adequately process 45% of the TBI claims. Then at the end of the paragraph, you mentioned that the rating veteran service representatives told you that they often did not return the inadequate reports due to pressure to meet productivity standards. And that continues in the fiscal year 2012 reviews. Why is that it's so driven to meet productivity standards? Is it because of policy from headquarters, or is it because bonuses and increase in salaries is predicated on getting more out the door versus adequacy? And wouldn't it be, have you looked at that issue? And have you looked at the issue, well, wouldn't it be better when you look at bonuses or increase in salary that it's dealt more with on accuracy versus just sheer numbers?
I think it needs to be a combination of both. In an environment as large as VBA, where they're processing so many claims, you have to have some focus on productivity, and you have to balance that with accuracy if you want any fiscal stewardship of the funds.
Okay, you mentioned the transformation plan that VBA has. Have you looked at that transformation plan to see whether or not they have benchmarks in place and whether the VBA is meeting those benchmarks? And do you feel that that plan is adequate to deal with the issue we're facing today?
We had some original challenges getting information on the transformation plan because the plan had not been approved by the Secretary at the time we started asking questions. I have reviews in process now looking at various aspects of the transformation. I can't really comment beyond that.
So you can't comment on the benchmarks or whatever. And for the VA, hopefully, Mr. Chairman, we'll be able to get a copy of that plan if we haven't already. My other question is a question I related to the first panel, and PVA mentioned that there does seem to be a kind of disconnect within VA system as far as the doctors in VHA versus the doctors in VBA, where VBA doctors might be asking for similar information that the VHA doctor has already done. Have you looked at that between the different VHA and VBA, how they might be able to synergize the efforts between the two versus being duplicative within the two?
Not as recently as I think you would like the information. We had looked at the coordination between VHA and VBA when a medical exam was needed. That information's a little dated. I'm not sure it would really help.
Yep. Are there any other areas within VHA and VBA that that we could speed up the process by VBA accepting what VHA might recommend?
Absolutely. I believe that the first panel actually brought up a significant vulnerability in that they're now with the new DBQ system, the reliance on this information, VHA would be at risk of doing unnecessary compensation and pension exams.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Want to add anything?
Okay. My other question is, when you look at the claims process, and I'll be asking VA for this information, I'd like to know how many are 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, to try to get a better feel of where the problem lies. In your review of what VBA is doing and to meet the productivity standards that the employees feel that they have to meet in order to be successful, have you looked at whether or not that is causing the more difficult claims to be pushed back further and further because they're dealing with the easier claims up front?
Yeah, try.
When we conduct inspections of the regional offices, we don't see in particular that the ROs are working the easiest claims. They typically work the claims first in, first out. So the oldest claims typically are the ones that are worked first. So we don't see any specialization towards 1 or 2 issue easy claims versus 8 or 10 issue more difficult claims. What we do see, however, in your earlier question was, it seems that VBA has concerns with gathering evidence quickly, whether it's from the Department of Defense or from VHA in a medical exam. They don't tend to gather that information quickly, and that we think that's where a lot of their timeliness lags in claims processing occurs.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Walls is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, thank you for the work you do. I've many times expressed how important the work you do is, and it helps us try and refine the process. I just have one, I guess, a question here. Are there any comparable enterprises to what VBA is trying to do anywhere, either across the government or in the private sector, in terms of volume, complexity, and things like that? Is it? In terms of volume. I know this is somewhat subjective, but just to help me get my mind wrapped around what we're comparing.
Go ahead. Yeah, not in terms of volume or even process. I'm not aware of any civilian agency or even Department of Labor that does work some, like workman's comp claims. They work with evidence and medical evidence and process claims, not to this volume. I think VA is this is unique to VA.
Okay. I ask this because I always think that Mr. Filner's argument on IRS is compelling when we make that. I personally think we should probably be as efficient of getting people money that we owe them as we are of taking it. That's something the public would ask for, but I'm trying to figure out, are we taking in all the variables? Are we bringing all the complexities to this? And where do we go to try and find the model? Is this just a sense of if we could scale up, we could get there, or the unique nature of it? It's challenging for me because I refuse to believe all of the good people and all of the good intentions for so long have allowed us to not fix this. So I don't know if there's any insights. You see this at a micro level more than I do, but
the only area I see would be to look at the risks associated with the claims and take an approach based on that, not just a flat-out approach to say, okay, pay everything at 30%, because 30% rating includes entitlement to other programs. But I believe that there would be a subset of claims that you would find a very low risk on that possibly VBA
and find those and process those and then make the case to the public, because I certainly think everyone here could understand if we processed a whole bunch or paid out a whole bunch of money that went to the wrong people, we're going to be on that side of it. That's why I'm trying to strike that balance between those that we can get with a high degree of accuracy, much like the IRS is able to do. I think that analogy part is good, but still understanding the complexity of those claims. And I think Mr. Michaud's point is that I think there's at least a belief among veterans that many times that complex cases get pushed back because it slows down processing time. And unfortunately, in many cases, complex claims are the ones that are most needy in terms of trying to get this done. So I yield back, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back, and with that, thank you for your testimony on behalf of the subcommittee. Thank you again for your testimony and your service to our veterans, and you now are excused, and I welcome the fourth panel to the table. Can we get her testimony in? Let's come back for it. Yeah. Let's come back for 5 minutes. We got time. There's 400 open votes on the floor.
Yeah, let's go ahead and recess.
You want to recess?
Yeah.
On second thought, the committee will stand in recess as we're probably 7 minutes into a vote right now, and we'll be back as soon as votes are concluded. Committee stands in recess.